Hello, welcome to Swansea Bay University Health Board's presentation on supporting mealtimes, a presentation for parents and carers of children who have difficulties with some aspects of eating. In this presentation, we're going to be looking at why children might experience these difficulties and then what we can do to help. We'll be going through lots of information and strategies in this presentation. We would advise that you pick what's the highest priority for you and your child and focus on that first. The strategies will require consistent implementation and trial and error over a period of time to determine effectiveness, as there are no quick fixes to eating. You are probably already trying lots of these things at home, so hopefully this presentation will give you some reassurance too. The first thing that we're going to be looking at is how we think about foods and reframe how we think about them. Children choose food in two ways. The oral motor demand, so how hard it is to eat, for example, yogurt, chicken nuggets, soft foods are very easy to eat, whereas crusty bread, steak and foods with different textures like a stew are more difficult and require a lot more mouthwork and an increased demand on oral motor skills. The sensory component is another way children choose foods. Does the food feel warm, cold, crunchy, slimy? Does it smell? For example, when we think about chicken nuggets, a food that lots of children gravitate towards, it's very easy to eat. Essentially, it's a pre-chewed meat, breaded, so it's less work to eat. And from a sensory perspective, they're typically always the same. They're the same size, same colour, same consistency, and same texture. Other foods like this are hot dogs and fish fingers. Many people say it is just all in their heads, or they're just fussy, but in actual fact, it's all about their body. Dr. Kay Toomey is a child psychologist who works with children with feeding challenges and had a child of her own with difficulties. The evidence suggests there is something inherently different in these children, and it is not the fault of the parent. The parent does play a role in helping though. You may have seen the iceberg analogy before, and we're going to use it now to explore what might be going on under the surface of what we're seeing. Feeding is the tip of the iceberg and the behaviour that we see. Underneath is all those components. Eating is the most complex thing we do as humans. Eating requires all 7 areas of the human function and requires them to be working correctly. This is why children can be completely functional in other areas of daily life yet have big struggles at mealtimes. To explain briefly, eating is the only thing that when we think about it requires all of our organs, the heart, lungs, nervous system, etc. It requires all of our muscles in order to sit upright to eat. We even use our feet, our core, arms and legs. We also use our internal organs. We also use all 8 sensory systems, which we will discuss further on. Nutritional status. If you are not taking enough calories, you will feel weak and then not have the energy to eat further, and so on. Making sure you are taking on enough iron, as this is linked to fatigue. Zinc is then linked to decreased appetite, and vitamin D is linked to absorption. Learning style, capacity and history all play a role. Eating is only reflexive as a young baby, and then we have to learn to eat, i.e. it is a learned behaviour. Research shows that children who are visual learners tend to be picky. Cognitive capacity. People may think it is easier to reason with older children to eat, but that's the opposite. Early intervention is key. The most difficult children to treat are 6 to 11-year-olds. History also plays a crucial role. For example, if every time your child ate as a baby they had reflux, they learn that eating causes pain and discomfort. Or if they have constipation every time after they eat, they may associate the pain of constipation with eating. Development. We know there are certain ages where eating can become a bit of a challenge, and typical developing children can get through these, whereas other children may face more challenges. This will be addressed further on. Environment. Don't blame the parent, but there are things that parents can do to make eating better or make it worse. Again, we'll be talking about this more later on. A small note about medication. Some medication can reduce appetite significantly, for example, ADHD medication. Let's talk about some physical considerations. Food isn't the number one priority for your body. Breathing is the number one priority, and postural stability is the second. Think about when you are full of cold. You eat and have to stop to take a few breaths in between because your nose is blocked. You can't taste, can't smell, and you feel like it's not worth it. This is the same for children. If they have asthma, allergies, a cold, they all play a role in respiratory challenges to eating. Our bodies need to be in a position to allow us to eat. If our brain power is going on staying upright and not falling forward or to the side, there's not much left to focus on eating. Children with low muscle tone may slouch, prop on their elbows so that their arms are not available to eat. They lock themselves in a position to compensate for a low muscle tone. Another note on low tone, this can also affect the GI tract. If you struggle to push waste through the system, you end up constipated, which is common in low-tone children, therefore backing the system up. This can also have a massive impact on appetite. Even as an adult, if we are constipated and full, we do not want to eat. Let's do a practical exercise to help understand the role of our posture. Sit on a chair and lift your feet off the floor, so they are floating, and also lift your elbows away from the table. Did you notice you sat more upright as you engaged your core? This is what we do to children when their feet aren't supported for 20 odd minutes at mealtime. This is a massive challenge, even to normal-toned children. They end up fixing at their hips, sliding out of their chair. Think about high chairs. They sometimes don't have feet supported. They may also be slippery as they are wiped clean. When a child learns they can't fix at their hips, they fix at their shoulders. So, imagine your child with their shoulders out and fixed. It is so difficult for them to feed themselves and therefore want an adult to feed them. We need 90, 90, 90. So, as you can see on the diagram, we want feet supported either flat on the floor or supported by a footrest at 90 degrees. This can be via a box or anything that the feet can rest on. Knees should be bent at 90 and also the hips. There should also be a back at the chair to support the child's back in an upright position. So, we've looked at physical considerations and postural stability. The next thing to consider is the sensory components to eating. It is established between 67 and 100% of people with feeding difficulties also have sensory processing difficulties. Most people know we have 5 senses: touch, taste, hearing, smell and sight. We actually have 3 more: vestibular, proprioception and interoception. Vestibular is our sense of balance and body position. Proprioception is our body awareness and where we are in space. And interoception is our internal body awareness. So, are we hot, cold, hungry or thirsty? We will briefly look at all of these now and how they contribute to eating. Touch. You may notice that children overfill their mouth. This may indicate they are undersensitive to touch and need to fill their mouth in order to get the input and the feel of food in their mouth. With extreme temperatures, so too hot or cold, you might notice that they either avoid them completely if they are oversensitive, or that they seek these out if they are undersensitive, for example, liking ice or hot soup. You might notice that they avoid their lips touching foods and cutlery if they are oversensitive, as they might find this type of touch painful, even though it's not harmful. You might notice in everyday life that they pull away from touch if they are oversensitive, and you may also notice that the child gets messy hands or face if undersensitive, as they are not recognising it as touching their skin. Smell. You might notice that you or your child has a preference for strong, bland flavours or smells. We all have our individual preferences. Children might seek out strong smells or avoid mealtime environments because they can be strong, overpowering or a mix of lots of different smells, which they find difficult to tolerate. This can make it hard for them in school canteens or at restaurants again because of the smells going on in the environment. You might notice that they have a gag response if they're particularly sensitive to strong or unpleasant smells. Thinking about taste then, you might notice that your child overreacts or underreacts to taste. Something you might consider as spicy, your child finds mild, or vice versa. They might have very keen sense of taste and would be able to tell if the food is a preferred brand. Again, you might notice a gag response if they're particularly sensitive to taste. Thinking about vision, a child might have difficulty if food is presented differently to what is usual. For example, if the carrots are cut into sticks rather than circles, or if the fish is a different size to what it usually is. They might not be able to recognise if food is presented differently. For example, if pizza is cut into squares rather than a triangle, or if the fish goujons are different shape to what they usually are. You might notice that a child has a preference for foods of certain colour, example beige, orange, etc. They might also dislike or not be able to tolerate foods touching. It may be too busy or overwhelming for them. Hearing. A child might like or dislike the sounds of eating, like crunchy carrots, chewing ice, eating crisps. You might notice that they struggle to eat in loud environments like a canteen or restaurant or at busy family mealtimes. Might be sensitive to the sound of other people eating or slurping drinks. They might have it to sit separately during mealtimes and can't tolerate the sound. The vestibular sense is linked to our postural control. You might notice someone has difficulties with this if they are slumped over the table or have difficulty maintaining an upright position when seated. You might notice that they avoid crunchy foods due to the fluid shift in their inner ear that happens when we have to crunch and chew hard. They might have difficulty drinking out of deep cups because that means that they have to throw their head back. Interoception is the internal body sense and awareness that tells us whether we're hungry, full, thirsty, hot, cold, and when we need to use the toilet. Your child might feel pain when they're hungry, and then there's a risk that they'll associate this pain with eating. Constipation is a big issue that we come across. If your child is constipated, then they will be feeling full and will have a reduced appetite. Or if the constipation makes them feel unwell, again, they're going to have a reduced appetite. You can probably recognise it in yourself too. If you're not 100%, you are likely to have a reduced appetite too. If your child goes to the toilet after eating and finds it painful to poo, then they might associate eating with pain as well. Thinking about body awareness or proprioception, this impacts lots of aspects of mealtimes and eating. You might notice that a child finds it difficult to use cutlery, might have difficulties with coordination and managing the movements and pressure needed to use a knife and fork. They might stab the food much too hard or barely touch it with the fork, or they may find it difficult knowing where to place and how to move their hands in order to cut the food. Thinking about overfilling the mouth. Another reason for this might be because of reduced body awareness, and if you overfill your mouth, it is easier to find the food with your tongue to move it around your mouth, chew and swallow. They might bang the table or cutlery to help them get input into their joints to support them knowing where they are in space. They may have difficulty bringing their food to their mouth and might use their hands to help the tongue move food around their mouth, similar to overfilling the mouth. We've looked at all the senses now, and hopefully you've been able to pick up on a few bits and start to think about and recognise where your child, or even you, is over or undersensitive in certain areas. We're going to look a little bit now on development. You've probably heard the notion that all children are picky eaters and will grow out of it. However, this is not always true and is not supported by research. It's been shown that 20 to 25% of children will struggle with some kind of difficulty between birth to 10 years, and research suggests 30 to 50% of these will outgrow without intervention. These statistics are true worldwide, and feeding difficulties are not a new or modern phenomenon. There are times in development where feeding tends to get better or worse for most children, and these traditions are between 4 to 6 months, when the child is learning their hunger cues, and maybe you are starting to think about weaning. When the baby is newborn, the rooting reflex is instinctive, but when we start eating, it's something that they have to learn. 12 to 14 months, when they might start getting a bit picky, taste changes, gaining personality and control. 18 to 36 months, similar to 12 to 14 months. 5 to 7 years old, 9 to 11 years old, they're growing up, trying to stand on their own 2 feet and establish themselves. And eating is something that they feel that they can control and manage independently, and so might start to reject certain foods or experience some difficulties. There are 5 specific skills that children need to learn in order for them to eat well. The first of these is sensory tolerance and exploration. We need this to be able to learn and explore different foods, to learn that a carrot's crunchy and a banana is slimy and slippery. 2. We need postural stability. As we said, breathing is priority and not falling on your head is second. Need to develop the core strength and skills to be able to sit upright for meal times. 3. Tongue tip lateralization. This is an oral motor skill where the tongue moves from side to side. Children who avoid real meat, i.e. not processed, raw veg, raw fruit with peels, possibly have difficulty with this. Consider this when making your list of foods your child will eat. What foods are missing? 4. Rotary chewing. Another oral motor skill. This is the most mature chewing pattern, with jaw movement laterally, downwards, across the midline to the other side and upward to close. 5. Positive mindset. This helps if children enjoy eating and are happy to come to the table. This can't be 100% of the time, but does help if they like it. This includes more than volume of food, the social aspect of sitting with family, eating at a restaurant, etc. Another consideration is the stage of development of your child. For example, you would use different strategies for a child in the magical thinking stage, like imaginary play, play with toys and food, compared with children in the concrete operational stage, where you would use more logical strategies. Environment does play a big role in eating. However, it is so important to remember that parents are not the major cause of feeding difficulties, but skill deficits and physical difficulties are the major cause. However, there are some things that you can do as a parent and guardian to support an environment encouraging to explore foods and learning how to eat. Some of the things in the environment that we can look at are the family mealtime structures, routines and schedules, our ability to be a good role model, If our children don't see us eating, how can we expect them to learn about food and eating? The terminology we use around food and eating, the food choices we make, these all play a role in whether our child's feeding issues get worse or better. So now that we've looked at some of the theory behind eating and why children might struggle, we're going to look at now at some of the strategies that might be useful to implement at home to help address these difficulties. It's important to note that none of these are quick fixes, and a lot of children's behaviours around food are ingrained over a long period of time, so trying to change then can be quite some time. As much as possible, try and view mealtimes as learning opportunities. You're the teacher and your child is the pupil, and they're learning about food and developing the skills involved in eating. Try to limit mealtimes to 20 to 30 minutes. We'll be talking about lots of different strategies in the next section, so we would encourage you not to try and change everything at once. This is probably unrealistic, but to try one thing at a time. This is more achievable, and you'll be able to identify what is and what isn't working. Try and make the hardest thing the priority for your child. For example, if this is coming to the table or sitting at the table for mealtimes or interacting with food. To briefly start by mentioning some commonly used strategies that we want to avoid is important to note. It is easy to fall into doing some of these, but we'd like to avoid them. Hiding foods. There is a difference between making pasta sauce with blended veg for baby-led weaning versus changing a preferred food. This can be done under guidance of professionals. For example, a child will only eat tomato soup. Might start by adding tiny amount of blended carrots, so taste and colour, etc. doesn't change. The child should be aware of this too, so they can reject the alteration and still have their preferred food. The risk of not informing them is that your child will lose their trust and they may reject their accepted food next time when offered to them. Risk of force feeding. It's a natural thing to want to do when you're desperate, but we don't recommend this. Forcing a child will elicit a stress response which we do not want, as this will ultimately put off eating. Stress increases cortisol levels, which suppresses our appetite. Force feeding isn't necessarily sitting there with a spoon and forcing the food into your child's mouth. It can look like punishment if they don't eat, cohesive behaviour like frightening them to eat, or negative reinforcement. For example, if you eat this, then you don't have to help with cleaning up, etc. Withholding. You think it will make the child eventually eat because they are hungry, but actually what we know is that the body just gets used to not eating, and we end up losing eating opportunities with the child. We know the child will wait it out if they don't have their preferred foods. We also need to think about the terminology that we use around foods that our children eat. Using the term preferred foods is what we would recommend, and not safe foods, because if we talk about safe foods, are we implying that all foods are unsafe? Using a reward. This happens all the time in everyday parenting. You end up just reinforcing and making foods more or less attractive. For example, eat your broccoli first and then you can have cake. This is making broccoli something bad to eat and rewarding with cake. We want foods to be equal. All foods have nutritional value. Have the foods next to each other. We also want eating to be an intrinsic motivating thing and not relying on rewards for eating. Food as a reward is ingrained in us as a society. Long gaps. We can get used to not eating food and it can have a negative effect on appetite. It also adds pressure when they do not have mealtime, pressure on child to eat larger volume and pressure on parent as you feel this is your one chance. It is often recommended to have 5 mini meals a day to increase opportunity for positive meal experiences. They may also have hunger pains and therefore not want to eat. There's also an impact on mood and behaviour, for example, hangry. Before moving on to the mealtime strategies, one of the quickest and most effective things to look at is your child's posture during mealtimes. If you think back to the start of this video about the body's priority, which is breathing and not falling down. So, addressing the child's posture can really help free them up to attend to eating. As we said before, we are aiming for 90-90-90 at the hips, knees and ankles. If their feet aren't supported, use a footstool or box. If they need support at the side, use rolled up towels. For infants, use appropriate seating like a high chair. Again, make sure their feet are supported. The last thing to look at then is the table. The best height is between the nipple and the belly button. Exploration through the senses. This is to be employed outside of mealtimes such as play. Just because we're talking about food, it doesn't mean that all strategies are going to be around the table. We'll be talking about outdoor play, messy play, food exposure, like cooking, supermarket shopping, food detective, social stories, craft work, etc. Earlier, we talked a little bit about oral motor skills that we need for eating. It may be worth doing activities to stimulate the oral motor muscles before eating. Use vibrating mouth toys, massage around the mouth, using chew toys, blow bubbles, blow or suck through straws, or pull faces. You can talk about the different parts of the mouth and tongue and pull faces in the mirror, moving the tongue in and around the mouth, side to side, up and down. This all helps to stimulate the muscles and prepare the mouth for eating and chewing. Looking at addressing sensory needs, you may be wondering what this has to do with mealtimes, but we need to prepare our children for the mealtimes by addressing their sensory needs so they can be in the right state to attend to the meal. Try to incorporate lots of full-body physical activity into everyday life. These give lots of input through the joints and muscles and help to calm the nervous system. Spend time out in nature and use proprioceptive heavy work activities before mealtimes. Things like crawling through tunnels, climbing up slides, scooter boards, pulling and pushing heavy items, jumping, wheelbarrow walking, and squeezing between cushions. The sensory cup analogy. In summary, this is a metaphor to explain sensory processing and individuals' thresholds. Each person has a different size sensory cup, which represents their sensory threshold. Sensory input is linked to the liquid filling the cup. When the cup overflows, it indicates the individual is overwhelmed. Please use the link on this slide to watch a video explaining this in further detail. Think about what you do to fill your own sensory cup. It is important for you, as the child's parent and carer, to regulate yourself first in order to support your child's regulation. Outside of mealtimes, give your child lots of opportunity for messy play. Messy play isn't only for babies. You can adapt it to your child's level and interest. Messy play can be wet or dry. The purpose of messy play in feeding context is to support the playful exploration of different tactile, olfactory and gustatory experiences. It's important to grade this as your child tolerates. For example, if your child doesn't tolerate wet textures, don't start messy play with wet Weetabix or mud pies. Start with what they are able to tolerate, for example, rice, lentils or pasta, and work up to wet textures. Try using tongs or utensils to play with the food so that they initially don't have to touch it with their hands. Explore by crunching, splatting and pouring. Hide toys that motivate them in things like jelly or shaving foam, rice or pasta. Incorporate lots of different textures such as sand, water, leaves, mud, etc. Food play is something else that we recommend to do outside of mealtimes, as this supports your child getting more comfortable with food without the pressure and expectation to eat it. Some activities that you could try include organising food by shape or colour, such as pastas, fruits, sweets, etc. Crafts using food like pasta, vegetable painting, potato stamping. Change properties of foods, for example, whisking eggs, bread to toast, freezing fruits. This way they can see and learn how one food can look and feel and maybe even taste differently depending on how it's processed. Try construction tasks, for example, make towers from spaghetti, carrot sticks, threading pasta onto straws, and even games that involve talking about food, like I went to the shop and bought. This is just a slide of some ideas of food play and making food fun. You can buy child-safe knives where they will go through fruit but shouldn't cut the skin. Ice cube trays that you can freeze berries in some water. You can buy sealable clear freezer bags to freeze foods in so your child can see how it looks but doesn't have to touch it with their hands. You can also purchase loads of different shaped stamps to use on food such as breads, biscuits, fruit, pancakes. This is another slide of some ideas of food play and making food fun for older children. You can encourage your child to get involved in gardening and managing their own allotment. You may support your child to engage in baking and cooking activities, making cakes or meals for self or the family. You could give the child the responsibility of shopping, provide them a list of foods needed, give them the needed money, and encourage them to take the lead in shopping to find the needed ingredients. Going then on to the strategies for mealtimes. Now that we've gone through the senses strategies for outside of mealtimes, we'll turn to the strategies that we can try around the table, looking at mealtime structures and routines. To promote independence in eating, ensure active participation. Some small bits of equipment can help your child be more independent. Adapted equipment like non-slip mats, suction plates, Dyson, adapted cutlery. Teach coping strategies. Have wipes or cloths available to wipe the hands or face if they struggle to have food on them or be messy. Teach them to move food away, for example, a not for now plate, rather than throwing off the table. This is when you have an empty plate on the table next to their own plate, and if they don't want to eat the food, they just move it onto the not for now plate rather than throwing it or having a meltdown. This way, they still interact with the food in a low pressure way. Honour this by not moving the food back to them. Allow your child to discard food appropriately. Spit out the food into a tissue instead of spitting it on the floor or throwing it away. Thinking about how you speak as well and being positive with language. For example, if they struggle or have a gag response, say, "That's okay, you're still learning about food." Consider the use of visual cards to show a mealtime structure and routine to support their understanding. Going on to structuring mealtimes and snacks. Familiarity is key. Try using the same place, table, cutlery for all snacks and meals. You can try having a specific placemat for your child as a cue to eating. Obviously, this isn't always possible. Think about restaurants or school or picnics and use your own judgment when it comes to this. Make sure there is at least one of your child's preferred foods available at every meal and snack so that they have something they can easily eat, but also offer your child family foods as well. As we said before, every meal is an opportunity for learning about foods. Follow the same time schedule where possible. Children over 18 months need to eat every 2.5 to 3 hours throughout the day rather than the traditional 3 times. Offering more mini meals throughout the day gives more opportunity for exposure to foods and also takes pressure off the parents. Try not to distinguish between meals and snacks. Quite often, meals associated with sitting down, boring family dinners, whereas snacks are seen more as treats where you can walk about with foods, out about in the park. At every mealtime or eating time, offer carbs, protein and fruit or veg. Even as adults, we often get into a routine of offering the same foods and meals, especially if we know we will eat it again. It is hard to make something that you know is likely to be wasted. There's lots of ideas of meals and recipes online. Having different foods at different times of day, you don't have to only have toast or cereal for breakfast. If you find in your house you are making several meals to please everyone, serve them together and encourage for everyone to take a bit of each food served on the table. Presenting foods later in day. For example, if you've already cut cheese earlier the day, serve it again later. By planning and preparation, we mean get your child involved with meals in any way they can. Meal times are about a lot more than just eating, and spiking interest in food is a good starting point. Children can help choose foods at the shop or when they're online shopping. This is dependent on age, obviously, as you may end up with a trolley full of chocolate. Again, depending on age, look at cookbooks or recipes together. For younger children, it could be baking cakes or easy sweet treats. For older children, you can be more creative and complex. See what they like and are interested in. Children can help decide what the family eats for the week. This gives them a sense of control and autonomy. It also gets them involved even if they don't enjoy the food themselves. They're involved in the process. Get them involved in preparing the meals, even if it's just getting the pots and pans or the ingredients together. Allow them to pick their own plate or get crafty and make their own placement that we were talking about earlier. Ask them to lay the table and help clearing up. These tasks are often seen as chores, so try to make them fun when getting them involved. Depending on age, role play as a parent. Again, depending on age, allow them to help serve the food, increasing the interaction with food. Allow your child to get out their energy pre-meal so they feel ready to sit and attend for the meal. If they are bouncing off the walls, they are unlikely to sit and eat quietly. Allow them to use lots of their energy before sitting down. This can be especially effective after school as they are likely to have been sat and listening for long periods of time during their day. Try a small sensory circuit. This doesn't need to be complex or use expensive equipment, just be creative. The main components are alerting, organising and calming. There's lots of information and ideas about sensory circuits online or on social media, or if your child does them in school, ask their teacher. Try and do lots of proprioceptive activities, for example, crawling through tunnels, climbing up slides, scooter board, pulling or pushing heavy items, going on the trampoline, wheelbarrow walks with siblings or over a gym ball, hiding under heavy blankets, squeeze between cushions. Going on to think about regulation for the actual mealtime. Create a calm, low-pressure environment. We don't want to start a mealtime stressed and anxious. Consider the noise and lighting, the busyness in the room. Try and limit distractions as much as you can. Ensure family members understand the child's needs. This can be really tricky. Make sure family members are on the same page, and if they're looking after your children, ensure they offer appropriate foods. For younger children, don't rush to clean their face and hands. Allow them to be messy. If we wipe away mess straight away, this teaches them that mess is bad, which we don't really want. As we said before, talk about the sensory properties of food rather than placing value on foods. For example, chocolate as a treat and broccoli is yucky. Instead, try this. Broccoli is green and crunchy. Or this chocolate melts on my tongue. And avoid commenting on how much the child is eating. Remember, the child is not the focus, but learning about food is. Do lots of positive role modelling and use positive language as we talked about before. Promote calm alert state by doing some of these proprioceptive activities that we talked about in previous slides. Depending on the needs of your child, consider the use of headphones. Sometimes the sound of people eating goes through them. Headphones can help dampen the sound or have a little bit of music on. Wobble cushions or vibrating cushions. If you have a child that is constantly moving, it might just help them get that movement without needing to get up at multiple points during the mealtime. Weighted equipment, for example a lap pad, but to kind of give them the sense of security. Lastly, think about their seating. Are they well supported and in a good posture to eat? Having a routine for mealtimes can support children being aware of when they are eating and can allow them to prepare themselves. As we all know, this isn't always possible. Use a common sense approach to this and aim for some consistency. Step 1. Warning that mealtime is approaching. Step 2. Transition. It's time to wash your hands now, or calming activity or sensory circuit. Step 3. Sit at the table. Step 4. Family style learning. Try to give everyone a little bit of what is being served. This is where a learning plate or a not for now plate can be used. A separate plate can be placed by your child with foods that they can try with a low pressure as a learning plate. A not now plate can be used for foods that the child wants to discard rather than throw away or on the floor. And finally, step 5, cleaning up, taking dishes to the kitchen, wiping surfaces, doing the dishes, etc. The Just Right challenge is designed to require a level of difficulty that needs some effort and persistence, but also ensures that the child is motivated and will succeed. Try changing your expectations when it comes to mealtimes, and this is easier said than done. Focus on what's really important. For example, your child doesn't need to use a knife and fork if it means they eat with their fingers. Especially think about this with younger children who may struggle with the motor skills of cutlery. Know how they interact comfortably with new foods. Can they touch, smell, lick the food, or have the food on their plate? Grade this challenge little by little. Offer a teeny tiny challenge when they are okay and calm, and maybe avoid challenge on days when they are struggling or dysregulated. For example, if you know they can smell a food, suggest that they pick it up or lick it. Know what they can tolerate from an oral motor perspective. This may be more relevant to younger children. What types of foods are they comfortable with? Purees, soft foods, etc. Always offer foods within this category to avoid setting them up to fail. And as they succeed with various foods, add a little more challenge each time. The same applies to their tolerance to sensory challenges, like smells and textures. Don't offer foods that are too challenging for them to manage. This will create negative experiences and associations. If your child only likes really dry things, go really slow with adding in moisture. We don't want them to have a negative experience with mealtimes. It can be quite distracting to chat about your day or have the TV or iPad on. We want them to be mindful eaters so they recognise the cues to when they have had enough to eat and when they're full. If you're currently relying on distractions such as iPads or TV, try and have a think about how you can remove the crutch. We want to teach children that mealtimes are more than just eating, but rather teach the social experience of eating. During mealtimes, try to remember to focus on learning about food and not put all the focus on the child. As much as possible, try and have family meals and sit down and eat with your child. We know this isn't always practical, but try to do this as much as you can. If you are the teacher for your child, you need to show up and they need to learn from you. Model good feeding behaviours. Children pick up so much that we do. If we aren't eating, how can we expect them to do it? Discuss the foods being served and use descriptive language for younger children. For example, the broccoli is green and crunchy. Try to avoid commenting on how much your child is eating, as this adds pressure. Describe how the food looks, smells, tastes, feels and sounds. When eating, over-exaggerate motor movements. This is especially helpful for younger children who are still mastering the actual skill of eating. It feels silly to do, but can really be helpful for your child. Next, imitate your child's eating. Research shows that the child eats new food only when their parent sits down and eats the food too. This is probably linked back to the evolution and the poison test. We are wired for survival. So back in the caveman days where we would go out searching for foods, you would want to see someone else eating first and knowing the food is okay. This is often why younger children will only eat off their parents' plate, even though they have served the same food. Make the food fun. Make foods into faces or volcanoes. Get creative with it. There are plenty of ideas online and on social media of different things you can do. Involve them as much as you can, as we have already mentioned in the structure. Avoid telling off at mealtimes, forcing. Like we said before, we want to really avoid a stress response at mealtimes. This will not support them on their journey. Think about how you feel when you're really anxious and stressed. You do not want to eat, and this is the same for children. We want to support them onwards and not to make things worse. We'll now talk about increasing variety and acceptance. Repeated exposure to a small amount of something you fear helps to naturally reduce anxiety over time. For example, if you don't like olives and someone puts a massive bowl in front of you, you're not wanting to go near that bowl. But if someone gives you one olive and there's a low pressure to eat it, you might pick it up. The next day they might give you another and you might smell it, and so on and so forth until you eat it. Consider stress levels when introducing new foods. We don't want to raise stress and anxiety for long periods, as this may result in negative association with mealtimes. If you're having an awful day, don't offer new foods because you're unlikely to get anywhere in this state. Instead, offer new foods when they are calmer. Consider timing. If you're offering new foods at mealtimes, do this after preferred foods. If trying a new food is too disruptive at mealtimes, consider offering a new food at a separate time, for example, during cooking activities or picnic. Try offering a new food with a new environment. Give choices to your child, as this helps to give them the sense of control and autonomy over their mealtimes. Even though it can be really stressful for parents and guardians when children aren't eating, try not to put that stress and pressure on the child, as it doesn't support them on their journey. Give them an option to discard the food if they've tried the food and they don't like it. Have a tissue or cup available for them to spit out the food if needed. Texture is the most challenging from an oromotor and often a sensory perspective, so be mindful of what they do and do not struggle with. We all have personal preferences as well. Some people only like smooth yogurts, some people only like orange juice with bits in. Variety is key. Avoid only offering one food. When you have a meal plan, try and have some variety within this. Consider offering deconstructed meals so the child is involved and can choose what they want. For example, try offering a deconstructed fajita, not all put together, or a burger deconstructed. Try and present familiar food alongside the same food presented in different ways. For example, if we're thinking about potatoes, if the child accepts mashed potatoes, offer it alongside hash browns or roast potatoes. Or if the child accepts bow tie pasta, present it alongside penne pasta. This helps the child to learn that the food can look, feel and taste different depending on how it's prepared. Sometimes children can become brand loyal and only accept foods of certain brands like Heinz baked beans or Walker's cheese and onion crisps. If this happens, or to prevent it happening, try and present these foods in bowls to support the child seeing the foods as just beans or crisps, and not that specific brand that they expect. Thank you so much for listening to the presentation. I hope that you have found it helpful and will begin to identify why your child may be having difficulties with eating, and that you'll be able to develop a toolkit of strategies to support them on their journey of exploring foods.